series. These videos will provide information about the rich history and culture of the African American Black community. Our first video is, what is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is the oldest celebrated commemoration of the ending of the last remaining enslaved Black people in the United States. On June 19, 1865, Union soldiers arrived to an island city on the Gulf Coast of Texas called Galveston. They overcame the resistance and finally informed the slaves that slavery had been abolished. This was 2.5 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation declared more than 3 million slaves in the Confederate States were free. Because the Confederate States were considered a safe place for slaveholders, and there were not enough Union soldiers to enforce the new executive order, the Emancipation
Hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of Vour as we talk about Juneteenth. Yes, Juneteenth, a federal holiday come to life, and we have a lot to celebrate for Black America. But first thing first, join in the conversation using the hashtag VourHereOnConnect, and don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing is caring. Tell a friend, call a friend, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss a thing. We talk about the holiday Juneteenth. Yes, Juneteenth is now popular amongst everyone in America because there's a reason to celebrate. Juneteenth became a federal holiday. Yes, Juneteenth became a federal holiday due to the fact that President Biden signed it into law, and now Juneteenth will be celebrated for years to come. All right, a lot of people are asking, what is Juneteenth? Juneteenth was when in 1865 in Texas, where the last group of slaves did not know that they were free. Well, Texas proclaimed that order and made an emancipation 2 years prior to the Emancipation Proclamation that made all Black Americans free in the United States. But in some cases in Texas, that didn't last until 2 years later, where in 1865, June 19th, a lot of Black slaves did not know they was free, and now they could celebrate free, and thus they call it Juneteenth. So let's get you catch up to speed on why Juneteenth became a federal holiday. Yes.
Making Juneteenth a federal holiday, we're recognizing the sins of the past, grappling with them, teaching them, and learning from them as we work towards a more perfect union. It'll be the only federal holiday that recognizes the terrible legacy of slavery, as well as the noble truth that none of us are free until we are all free.
On this vote, the yeas are 415 and the nays are 14. The bill is passed.
That the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day.
We see a lot of people, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and a lot of Democratic luminaries from Congress and lawmakers pushing the effort to make Juneteenth a national holiday, and they did so on June 19, 2021. What an amazing day. This is a day to remember. This is a day to celebrate. This is a day, as what June 19th was, the end of slavery and freedom for all Black Americans. What a way and what passion for that. So, a lot of people want to know, what is Juneteenth? Well, let's hear with this.
Juneteenth, I said, it is living freedom. Is accepting the values of this great nation that turned, I hope forever, against the idea of holding others as slaves.
It's something to hold on to let us know that, hey, we can we can go on.
In the streets, they were saying, hallelujah, we're free. And they made a decision at that time to never forget that day.
Former slaves that did relocate here built a community for people to live and work, worship, go to school. These things they did not have when they were enslaved, and they did not have when they were free. Know and understand what freedom is all about and what happened on Juneteenth in 1865.
So Juneteenth is a day of jubilation. It's a day when families gather together, but it is a very important historic time. And it is a historic time, if you will, to be able to, in fact, acknowledge what has been wrong can be fixed.
Catch you up to speed on what is Juneteenth, June 19th, thus known as Freedom Day, a maximation day, and June 19th, a maximation Freedom Day. So June 19th will live on, and we get to learn the history, we get to learn the lineage, and we get to learn the significance of what Juneteenth is all about. So a lot going on, but let's hear on a special edition of what the people say about June 19th and what you people said out there about June 19th and how important it is and how crucial it is, the history, the significance of what June 19th is all about. Let's take a look.
Juneteenth, it's kind of like independence for Black people in this country.
I know that it is a celebration, and I know it's on June 19th, and I know it has to do with Black history.
No, not at all.
Yes, I think so. Isn't it the day that we officially got our freedom?
It's the actual official day that all slaves in America were free.
enslavement and free labor. There are many rumors as to why they didn't get the message. Some say the officials at the time did not want it to happen until a couple of harvests were made, and for economic reasons. They wanted to get more money out of the slaves that they had. Some say that one of the men who were taking the message to them was killed on the way by people who didn't want the message to get through. But for whatever reason, a very harmful, oppressive institution continued. I can't remember ever being taught in one school that I went to about Juneteenth. No one ever gave me that history.
It's a program where everybody that's about the African diaspora, and even those that are not of the African diaspora that help with our struggle, it's a program that everybody can come together and be a part of.
Modern day oppression is still going on. Discrimination and racism, all those things are still going on. So I think that what Juneteenth provides is a forum for us to at least begin a discussion and celebrate, okay, we were freed on this day. And this is not just important to Black people. This is important, this is American history. It is important that everybody knows that Black people were an enslaved people and who ultimately became free at some point, and that this took place in Galveston, but in general, that we came through emancipation, and there's other steps that we have to take.
People are educating up to speed with June 19th. So June 19th, giving you the history, the lineage, and the significance of what's going on. Speaking of history and significance, we do a special for the people edition where people, experts that know around about June 19th could break it down a little bit further on how June 19th is critical to Black America and critical to America as a whole. Let's take a look.
When Texas became the last state to free its slaves in 1865, 2 full years after the Emancipation Proclamation. 156 years later, it just became a federal holiday, and joining us now is the author of On Juneteenth, Pulitzer Prize winner, author, historian, and Harvard professor, Annette Gordon-Reed. Professor Reed, first of all, thank you for being here with us, and Sunny has the first question.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor. I just loved your book. It's such easy reading, and it's just wonderful. Your new book is a series of essays about Juneteenth, a celebration that started in your home state of Texas. Juneteenth just became a national holiday. Tell us why it's just so very important.
Well, I think it's important because the day commemorates, I think, a major advance in human rights. Obviously, everything wasn't okay for the enslaved people after they declared that slavery was over, but it ended legal chattel slavery in Texas and was an important step for the American Union.
Well, in this book, Professor, you write about your childhood. You grew up during the final years of segregation in Conroe, Texas, and you were the first Black student to integrate a white school in your town. Tell us about your experiences dealing with segregation and how hard it was to integrate your school.
Well, when I was a small child, when I went to the doctor, we had to go to separate waiting rooms, a smaller waiting room for the Black citizens, and not as well appointed as the one that was reserved for whites. When we went to the movies, we had to sit in the balcony. And when I was 6 years old, my parents decided to send me to a white school under something called the Freedom of Choice Plan, which was put in place to get around Brown. It was tough at first. My teacher, Mrs. Daughtry, was wonderful. Everybody remembers their first grade teacher. She treated me just like all of the other students. Some of the kids were nice and some weren't. So it was a mixed bag. And I was happy when later on more students joined me in the school after the Supreme Court struck down these freedom of choice plans.
Professor, last month we commemorated the first anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. His death sparked worldwide protests and what many have called a racial reckoning. Where do you think the country stands on race and inequality today? Are things, in your view, better or worse?
Well, we're at an interesting time period because things have gone backwards in a number of ways as we witness some of the states around the country that have been putting in place what are essentially are voter suppression measures designed to respond to the fact that so many people, black and white, came out to vote in the last election. So in that way, we seem to be sliding backwards. I mean, I think the George Floyd murder sparked a conversation that's necessary. I was actually surprised to see how it went not just nationwide, but actually worldwide. So it's opening up a dialogue, a conversation that I think is really important, and I hope it continues.
Well, Professor, President Obama recently said that one of the biggest issues dividing America is cancel culture. Do you agree with him?
No, I don't. I don't think, well, put it this way, one of the biggest issues, I think we have many issues that are bigger than that. And I think the notion of cancel culture really depends upon the politics of the person. People on the left and right try to shout down people with whom they disagree. I wouldn't say that that is a major problem. And I admire the president very much, but I disagree with him about that as a major issue.
So, Professor, so far 14 states have passed laws that will make it harder for people to vote. Many believe this is voter suppression and that these laws will disenfranchise millions of black voters in particular. So are we seeing Jim Crow too?
Yeah, related to the question previously, I think this is the major issue, a huge issue in the country right now. And people certainly seem to be trying to bring us back to that. We're not at Jim Crow 2 yet. There are efforts to do this, but there are also efforts to counter it. So we'll have to see what happens, whether they are successful or not. But it is an attempt, I think, to cut down on black voter participation and black exercises of power.
Signs Juneteenth into law yesterday during a large ceremony. The vice president was there by his side. Other lawmakers were there as well, but he also had Opal Lee by his side. How big was that moment?
That was tremendous because a lot of Americans do not know or did not know who she was or what she did or how committed she was to this cause. So it was a nice gesture to be able to acknowledge that this was not necessarily something that was done solely by elected officials, that like many incredible social justice movements in this country's history, that it started from the ground up, and that grassroots leaders like Ms. Opal Lee were necessary in order to get Washington, D.C. to acknowledge the will of the people.
Now, Juneteenth is the first federal holiday signed into law since Martin Luther King Jr. Day 40 years ago. Why do you think it took so long for this to happen and for so many in this country to even learn what Juneteenth is?
White supremacy. I mean, there's no other way to sort of, make this sound better than what it is. It's not as if Juneteenth wasn't known. Certainly in the black community, we celebrated it. Certainly in the state of Texas, they knew the history. So the question is, why was it kept out of our history books? Who would have benefited from this information not being shared? I would suggest the same sort of worldview that benefited from all of the race riots that happened, all across this country. We know about Tulsa and Wilmington, but so many other cities also experienced these horrific race riots. They were all kept out of the history books. Who benefits from that? So when you ask, why didn't so many people know about Juneteenth, I would simply say it's the same reasons why you see today people are trying to mischaracterize January 6th as just a normal tourist visit.
So what was it like growing up celebrating this holiday, knowing so many people didn't even know what it was? And how do you hope that changes going forward?
Well, a couple of things. I remember Juneteenth growing up in Detroit. We used to have celebrations in church. We had celebrations in downtown. There were lessons taught in my classroom. I was really fortunate to have been in an advanced school, which made sure that those gaps that other schools didn't have were filled in my school. So I recognize my privilege in that, and I'm grateful for it. but also I hope what it does is continue a dialogue about our history, and not just a service dialogue. Case in point, yay, we have Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Now let's talk about what happened before that. That's important, because it's not as if slave owners or former slave owners weren't already receiving compensation or reparations for the loss of slaves before Juneteenth. They were getting compensation for the slaves they lost while people in Texas were still enslaved. Why do you think that is? What impact did it have on the lives and the policies? These are now the discussions we need to have, because there are elements of those pieces of legislation that are still prevalent today, because they inform their predecessors, and those predecessors kept building on those predecessors. And eventually what you have is a system that is fully ingratiated in sort of like this colorist society that we're trying to gloss over by thinking we shall overcome in a room and signing a piece of paper. That is a nice gesture, but we still need to do the work.
So, Elsie, what's appropriate in terms of how to celebrate Juneteenth, and how are you celebrating this year?
Well, first of all, I was actually just Googling, because I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona right now, and so I was Googling to see what was happening in my immediate area. Scottsdale is the former sundown town, and for those of you who don't know, sundown towns were places in America where African Americans and other people of color needed to be cleared out of before the sun went down. Otherwise, the cops could arrest us, the KKK could kill us, etc. So Scottsdale is a sundown town, former sundown town, so I'm curious to see what they're doing here to acknowledge it. But if I'm not satisfied, trust, I will zip right on over to LA and find myself a party where my people are celebrating this, because this is a tremendous moment. I don't want to downplay it. It's a tremendous moment. It just isn't the final moment.
All right. Well, Elsie, I'm sure you're going to find a great celebration.
But I will not die without representation.
A lot of experts saying what Juneteenth is and how important Juneteenth is, and hopefully Juneteenth will be important for many generations to come. Well, thank you all for watching this special edition of our Talk About Juneteenth, and gave you the history, the significance, and what June 19th is going to be going forward. I've been your host, Kendrick Dick, saying so long. We'll see you next time for another edition of Wow.
We were saying I brought business. All right.